Coming up today, almost fully recuperated after a mild illness, President Park Geun-hye has a packed schedule that includes finding a new prime minister and pushing through her economic reforms. The finance ministers of Korea, China and Japan agree to cooperate closely to minimize the adverse effects of their government's monetary easing policies. They also look into a three-way currency swap agreement. Plus, thousands of migrants are rescued from boats in the Mediterranean Sea as the influx of those trying to reach Europe continues. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Monday, May 4th here in Seoul. Thanks ever so much for joining us on this first day of the working week. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this morning, President Park Geun-hye is expected to return to work this week after coming down with a mild illness upon her return from her South America tour late last month. She has an awful lot on her plate, starting with the nomination of a new prime minister and a series of political and economic reforms to try and push through. Our Connie Kim starts us off.
President Park Geun-hye, recovering from ill health, is likely to return to work this week to get started on a list of pressing issues. An official speaking on condition of anonymity told Seoul-based Yonhap news agency Sunday that President Park's ability to resume her public schedule would depend on her health, but there is possibility she will start her duties this week. If she returns to work on Monday, President Park is expected to preside over a meeting with her presidential secretaries. The issue topping her to-do list is likely to be the nomination of a new prime minister, following the resignation of former Prime Minister Lee Wang-gu. Lee resignated last month amid allegations of taking bribes from late businessman Song Wan-jong. More than 10 high-profile figures are believed to be on the list of possible candidates, including the president's special advisor for civil affairs Lee Myung-jae and acting prime minister and finance minister Choi Kyung-hwan. The president is also expected to offer her remarks on reforms to the pension system for public servants. On Saturday, following months of talks on the issue, the country's two main rival parties struck agreement on a plan that would raise civil servants' contribution to their pensions and decrease their monthly payments. Experts say President Park will speed up her efforts to bring about reforms in the political arena and revitalize the economy on the back of the ruling party's sweeping victory in a by-election late last month. President Park's approval ratings rebounded to 39% last week, the biggest leap in a week since the first week of March. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Prosecutors will issue summons for 6 associates of former Prime Minister Lee Wang-gu and a regional governor as part of a widening investigation into a major bribery scandal. According to Seoul-based Yonhap news agency, the list includes 3 aides to Lee and 3 to Gyeongsang-namdo Province Governor Hong Jun-pyo. Prosecutors believe the aides, including chauffeurs and accountants, could hold the key to getting to the bottom of the scandal. The 6 associates were named in testimony by close aides to the late businessman Song Wan-jong. Now, Lee and Hong are 2 of the 8 politicians named on a list left by Song before his apparent suicide last month that suggested he had delivered bribes to them. North Korea has completed work on a new satellite command and control center, raising speculation about the possibility of another rocket launch. The North Korean Central News Agency said on Sunday that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un visited the center, though it didn't say when, and vowed to continue satellite launches. The speculation is that Kim could be planning a long-range rocket launch this year to mark the 70th anniversary of the establishment of the ruling Workers' Party and his 4th year in power. The regime is under UN sanctions for its rocket launches. North Korea's satellite launch in 2012 was viewed by the UN as a long-range missile test. An investigation is underway into a South Korean college student who is known to have been detained in North Korea for illegal entry. The South Korean government says it's working to fact-check the details of Ju Won-moon's detainment. Now, Ju is a 21-year-old New York University student who, according to Pyongyang, was arrested on April 22nd for illegally crossing into North Korea from China via the Yalu River. Now, it's still not known why Ju had attempted to enter North Korea. His parents were reportedly only aware that their son was going on a trip to China. Ju's detention brings the current number of South Korean nationals held in the north to 4. Asian countries have agreed to promote the use of a currency swap deal to facilitate local currency usage in trade settlements within the region and avoid excessive dependence on the US dollar. The agreement was reached during the ASEAN +3 summit of the finance leaders of the ASEAN member states and Korea, China and Japan, which was held in Azerbaijan on Sunday. The member nations also decided to promote ways to strengthen financial cooperation between Asian countries as a way to prepare in advance against possible financial crises from external shocks. Now, on the sidelines of the meeting, the finance ministers of Korea, China and Japan also agreed to work together to minimize the adverse effects of their government's monetary easing policies. Foreign investment banks say they expect the Korean economy to pick up speed in the second quarter of the year. They think the government's expansionary policies and improved domestic spending will drive this recovery. Our Kim Min-ji has this report.
The Korean economy is expected to recover starting in the second quarter of this year. That's according to foreign investment banks, which attribute the forecast to the government's expansionary policies and first quarter GDP growth that beat market expectations. The economy grew 0.8% in the January to March period from the previous quarter, quickening from a 0.3% gain in the final quarter of last year. The banks attributed the better-than-expected growth to improvements in domestic spending and production in non-manufacturing sectors. Morgan Stanley, for one, said domestic demand grew by 1.6% in the first quarter from the one before, the biggest jump since 2012, due to a rebound in fixed investment thanks to improved business sentiment. Some foreign banks expect the nation's GDP growth to pick up to the 1% range in the second half of the year on the back of low global oil prices, the government's stimulus measures, and the revitalization of the housing market. Korea's growth rate has been in the 0% range for 4 straight quarters. However, other banks point out that slowing exports due to the strengthening Korean won and uncertainties regarding structural reforms could have a negative impact on growth. Nomura revised down its growth forecast for the second quarter to 0.6% from 0.9%. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, Korea's slowing economy has been bad news for employment. According to a report by the Hyundai Economic Research Institute, the number of workers at Korean companies has been on the decline since the first quarter of last year. The number of workers grew by 167,000 in the first quarter of 2014 from a year earlier, but that figure has since fallen steadily. Only 27,000 jobs were added in the first quarter of this year. The manufacturing and construction industries were hit the hardest, with the number of workers actually falling in the first quarter. The decline was attributed to the prolonged economic slowdown we're feeling here in Korea that has lowered companies' ability to create new jobs, as well as job cuts in key sectors. The number of Internet Protocol TV subscribers in Korea has been on a steady rise since its launch in 2008. The Korea Communications Commission says there were more than 10.8 million subscribers as of the end of last year, up from 8.6 million in 2013. The telecom watchdog also says the IPTV industry sales soared to $1.04 billion in 2013. That's a nearly tenfold leap since its launch in 2008. Now, KT has the lion's share of the market at 54%. Industry watchers say service providers' efforts to provide viewers with services like Ultra HD help push the industry's sales to new heights. More stories of survival despite the odds are emerging from Nepal. 3 people were reportedly rescued from beneath rubble on Sunday, a full 8 days after a massive earthquake hit the country. Local police told the Associated Press that 2 were buried under a collapsed mud house near a mountainous village west of Kathmandu, while a 3rd was pulled from under the earth following a landslide. In addition, AFP reports that a 101-year-old man was rescued from the rubble of his house on Sunday and is now recovering in hospital. And in a separate development, 5 Korean climbers who have been trapped in the Himalayas are now back in Kathmandu. According to the Korean embassy in Nepal, the climbers were near Namche village when the quake struck. One of them had a fever, but it was not life-threatening, and all 5 are scheduled to fly back to Korea on this Monday. Now, in what has been described as one of the biggest missions of its kind so far this year, nearly 6,000 migrants were rescued off the Libyan coast over the weekend. The Italian Coast Guard says the migrants from countries like Sudan, Libya, Somalia, Eritrea and Ethiopia were picked up from dangerously overloaded wooden and rubber boats in well over a dozen separate operations by Italian and French ships. Now, those migrants have now been taken to Italy, and rescue missions in the Mediterranean Sea are ongoing. Around 1,800 people have died this year alone trying to cross the sea, a 20-fold increase on the same period in 2014. With a key World War II anniversary on the horizon, German Chancellor Angela Merkel has stated that Germany cannot simply draw a line under its past and must remain sensitive to the damage it caused to other countries. Speaking in her weekly podcast ahead of the 70th anniversary of the end of the war, Merkel said Germans have a special responsibility to be alert, sensitive and aware of what they did during the Nazi era. Merkel's sympathy towards the victims of Japan's wartime aggression is in marked contrast to that of Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The Japanese leader, on a high-profile trip to the United States last week, refused to acknowledge or apologize for some of Japan's most horrific war crimes, such as its sexual enslavement of hundreds of thousands of women from Korea, China and other nations in the 1930s and during the Second World War. The Korean government has partnered up with a state-run research institute to test remotely controlled robotic machines for deep-sea excavations. The 6-legged mechanical creature, which looks like a spider, is expected to help extract objects of great historical value from under the deep. Now, Kim Ji-yeon reports.
A robot swims through the muddy waters using its 6 metal legs and is remotely lowered to the seafloor. It picks up a piece of porcelain with its metal arms, which are remotely controlled by operators in a control room. Up until now, Korea's West Sea was off limits for a lot of divers, as the area is notorious for its high currents and frosty waters. But this piece of underwater equipment is expected to make it easier to excavate objects of historical importance.
It's developed to help divers excavate in the deep water.
The machine, known as the CR200 or Crapster, is part of an $18.6 million project spearheaded by the country's ocean ministry. It partnered up with the Korea Research Institute of Ships and Ocean Engineering and the National Research Institute of Maritime Cultural Heritage for the future development of deep-sea robots without the help of foreign technology. The Crapster is equipped with cameras that can send sonar and ultrasonic images of underwater objects some 150 meters away. The commercialization of the machine will start in mid-May after a 1-month test period ends. The technology is also expected to be applicable for other purposes, such as the exploration of natural resources. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, spring is the season for flowers, and some of them are making their way onto dining tables here in Korea. These edible flowers are not just pretty to look at, they're also packed full of nutrients that are good for our bodies. Our Won Ji-yeon tells us more.
Spring is here, and it's being served on a plate. With seasonal flowers in full bloom, more people are trying to get a taste of spring by adding edible flowers to classic Korean dishes. For instance, the flavors of this bibimbap were taken to a whole new level with the addition of edible flowers. Soy sauce was used instead of traditional red pepper paste, which helped bring out the bittersweetness of the flower petals. And many diners agree that the flowers are a treat for the eyes and the palate.
The flowers are almost too pretty to eat, but they're delicious and I feel healthier after eating them.
Some of the most common edible flowers in springtime are pansies, begonias, and geraniums. And restaurant owners like Ko Seok-gu make sure that the flowers are safe to eat.
We make sure these flowers are grown organically. We only give them soil and nothing else, not even fertilizer. Since they're grown naturally, they're filled with healthy nutrients.
Edible flowers are not just great for brightening up a dish, they're also good for the body. In fact, scientists have found loads of antioxidants in approximately 20 different flowers that are used as food in Korea. The flowers are also packed with proteins, vitamins, and minerals. But despite the health benefits, flower consumption should not be taken lightly. Scientists warn that some flowers are toxic, and even the edible ones can cause severe allergic reactions. Won Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. We do hope you have a great start to the week, and thanks as always for watching, and we hope to see you at the same time on Tuesday. Goodbye.